A Matter of Price, a Hyborian Lore story by James McConnell. This story takes place roughly 6 to 8 weeks after R.E. Howard's story, The Tower of the Elephant. Conan is a young and daring thief in the city of Arenjun. In this story we meet some of the personalities I imagine he may have met and learned the craft of being a thief from. Part 1. The alleys were occupied by a moving mass of people. It reminded Conan of the silt-filled rivers that partially froze over in his homeland. A great swirling and meandering slush of melted snow and muddy water that would make onlookers uncertain if they should brave a step. The streets of Arenjun were much the same. He would not have minded the constant cacophony of arguing voices, nor did the sense of the unwashed and the lotus fumes offend him. What had set his teeth on edge was the light. Between the awnings and the rising plumes of smoke, the light never quite reached down into the streets in any honest expression. Flickering candles and torches further ruined one's vision, as the light they shed tended to catch on the smoke and reflect itself back in an obscuring haze. He managed to push his way gently through the crowd and place his back to the wooden wall of a market stall. He was finally in position. He glanced down the alley that the stall was flush against, and noted that there were only 2 other people in it. A whore and her patron had slid into the dirty and narrow divide. The woman noticed Conan before her patron, distracted by the pliant work of her hands beneath his robe, could do so. Her expression was one of boredom. When her gaze fell to the Cimmerian, she offered a smile of invitation. Conan shook his head, and with his hand motioned her away. The whore, no stranger to Arenjun's more tender customs, whispered in her client's ear, and the man was persuaded to leave the alley with her by means of the other end. Conan was larger and broader than most men. The women of the streets often spotted him first before his fellows. At first the attention had appealed to his natural youthful drives. He had discovered that attention, though, was the bane of a successful thief. It did little good to strong-arm away a merchant's purse if his face was remembered. Twice now, Conan had to triumph in sword fights with mercenaries hired by the fat men whose coffers he had plucked. His reserves of coins were not running low, but only because he had forced himself to live uncharacteristically frugally. He was interrupted from his musings by the fall of a shadow. A quick glance told Conan all he needed to know. On the low roof of a building, a woman was peering over its edge. Many of the Zamorans slept on the roofs of their homes, so seeing a woman or a man on a roof was not unusual. But the woman's stature and the carriage were not that of the local Dizians. She had the strange gait that Conan could only describe as bow-legged. A Hyrcanian gait. No matter how far we are from where we were born, there are always signs of our homeland in our behavior if one knows where to look, Conan thought. The city had quickly introduced him to the value of observing people as intently as he had been trained to read a trail when hunting. The Hyrcanian paused where she was and began scanning the street. She was clearly looking for someone. Conan discreetly examined the street, trying to discover whom it could be the Hyrcanian could be searching for. As he peered about the street, his gaze fell upon Jadul Rajam and his bodyguards. Arenjun was a city of many different peoples mingling, but even amongst the background of variety, these men would have been easy to spot. They were from Vinja. Jadul had the mien of a man of privilege, yet even kings must on occasion review their holdings to be sure their associates are not incompetent. So it was that Jadul would make infrequent visits to the market and conversize to be sure that his investments were properly managed. His bodyguards were only slightly less tall as Conan. They wore turbans of dark blue and robes of the same color. Upon their hips they wore tulwars from their homeland. The curved swords were unadorned by gems or filigree. They had been chosen for practicality. Conan approved of their choice, for he knew that style did not win battles. There were only 2 of the guards. One of them made eye contact with Conan and nodded. Conan cursed. His first adventure in the city had spread his reputation. The entire city seemed to have heard of his adventure in Yara's tower. It was an adventure that had ended in the tower crumbling to the ground. Yet as the tower fell, his infamy rose. People passing him in the street would remark, "The Cimmerian," had passed their way. These, and his inability to work a set of lockpicks decently, had helped lighten his purse. Most likely the guard had recognized him from those fastly spread tales. Jadul neared where Conan was leaning. He was examining fruit in a stall. He lifted a large green thing and squeezed it. Conan heard Jadul tell the merchant that the mango, for that is what the fruit was called, was souring. Yet the vendor pleaded with Jadul to remain with a promise that he had seeds of the plant in a secured box. This appealed to Jadul, who began haggling with the vendor. The bodyguards continued to watch the street life pass. Their gaze roamed and spared no one from scrutiny. Conan noticed that a pair of Kothian brothers, Sidjal and Setpar, were walking towards where Jadul was standing. Conan knew that they could be hired for strong-arm robberies and other matters of violence. Murder would cost extra, but the two brothers could be bought for that service as well. Conan could feel their intent. They were approaching quickly and with little care for being seen. Conan glanced back up to the roof. The Hyrkanian woman was there, but now she was masked. In her hand she held a bow to which she was knocking an arrow. Conan could see the plot clearly now. Sidjal and Setpar were but a distraction for the guards to prevent them from blocking the archer's shot. Neither guard had seen the archer on the roof. Conan did not have much time. He shoved aside a member of the crowd and stepped behind the stall. The vendor looked at him alarmed but did not have a chance to protest. Conan shoved him aside with one hand and grabbed Jadul with the other. With his great strength he dragged the merchant across the stall's board and spun him around as the first shaft struck. Jadul looked in amazement as the arrow reverberated in Conan's back. "Stay low," Conan commanded as he pulled the merchant down to the ground. The turban guards were now engaged with Sidjal and Setpar. The Kothians were armed with war clubs and long knives. The weapons were humble, but easy to conceal. The Jul had hired men of quality, though, and the Vengeans were preventing the two Kothians from getting near their charge. A second arrow penetrated the wood paneling of the stall. "Crom curse Hyrkanians and all their kunis-sucking kin," Conan yelled at the archer. The next shaft skidded off the top of the stall's board and scratched the side of his head. He growled and turned his attention to Jadul. "Can you run?" he asked. "Yes," Jadul answered. "Do not stray more than an arm's length from me, keeping me between you and the sniper. We are going to run down that alley. Do you understand?" Conan asked. "Yes," Jadul said. "It is doubtful that the sniper speaks your language. Tell your guards what we are doing, and try not to let them stab me while they are at it," Conan ordered. Jadul Rajam shouted as requested to his two men. The Zamorans had parted, giving the combatants room to brawl. The Kothian brothers were unblooded, but also giving ground. One of the archer's shaft landed in the street near the foot of a bodyguard. They yelled instructions to Jadul, and the merchant yelled back. "They understand," Jadul informed Conan. "Then we rise." "Now," Conan ordered. The arrow impacted him in the back almost as soon as he rose. Conan grunted. He ushered the merchant down the alley while praying that the arrows did not land in his legs or arms. They raced down the alley with the bodyguards following them. They had gone perhaps 40 paces and one of the guards yelped in pain. An errant shaft had skimmed his arm. They reached the end of the alley and turned to the north. They slowed only when they had put many buildings between them and the site of the attack. Jadul collapsed on the street to have his bodyguard reach under his arm and lift him. "Are you injured?" the man asked Jadul. "He's only panting because of the run," Conan grumbled. "Not all of us can be impervious," the injured bodyguard said to Conan. Conan swiped the blood leaking from his head. He replied, "Not as impervious as I'd wish." "How is it you are standing, with a pair of arrows in your back, elephant man?" the bodyguard asked. "That damn tower," Conan growled. He undid the clasp of his coat and pulled it from about his shoulders. Strapped to his back was a small shield. He undid this shield and pried the arrows from it. "And my name is Conan, not Elephant Man." "Thank you for your intervention, Conan," Jadul said, mispronouncing Conan's name, as so many foreigners did. "Were it not for you, I would surely be dead. I am grateful." "Sire, this one is a well-known thief," the uninjured guard said. I am a thief, but I am not an assassin. Men should stare the man they intend to kill in the eye and match blows with him, not skulk and snipe at him like a damned pick or poison him like a cursed Stygian, Conan said. The three Vengeans had no knowledge of whatever a Pict was, but they were more than familiar with the reputation of the treacherous Stygians. You have done me a service, and have been injured for it. Please, let me see to the tending of your wound, and present you with a proper feast as way of thanks, Jadul insisted. I will accept the surgeon's aid, but dining with you is out of the question. Someone willing to assassinate you in the street has also likely poisoned all of your food, Conan replied. Jadul's face betrayed that he had not realized how dire his need may be. Do you have any idea who may have tried to assassinate my master? The injured guard asked Conan. I saw a Hyrcanian woman don a mask shortly before the attack. It was this person that was the sniper. Conan held up his shield. The arrows had penetrated the metal boss and the wooden body of the shield. Had it not been for the leather jerkin he wore, the arrowheads would have pricked Conan's skin. I can replace your lost shield, Jadul said. Come, let us retire to my home. It may have already been staked out by our foes, one of the guards commented. Unlikely, said Conan. Otherwise they would have tried to kill him in the residence rather than on the street. The uninjured guard shared a silent look with the injured one. Conan was no sorcerer, but he could read their thoughts. They were asking if they could truly trust the fortuitous nature of the Cimmerian's intervention. But finally they decided that it was better to risk a fight in the compound they controlled than risk an adventure amongst the narrow twists of Arenjun. Jadul Rajam's manor was indeed a palace. Behind the gates manned by crossbowmen there lay a long pool. The pool was flanked by exotic plants and loud birds the size of dogs. The birds made a horrendous racket with their calls. Their plumage was bright and gaudy, with long shimmering tail feathers. A pair of field slaves worked at Jadul's yard. They were dressed in plain cloth, but to Jadul's credit, they looked well-fed and unabused. As Conan passed, they averted their eyes. Conan guessed they had been brought from somewhere even farther to the east than he had heard, perhaps from the Kichai, or the isles that were rumored to lay beyond. Who could know? The guards and Jadul escorted him into the main house. The house's gates were flanked by guards that bore maces and wore mail. They looked to be Zamorin's, and they eyed Conan distrustfully. When the survivors passed inside the gate, Conan overheard one say, "Elephant man," to the other. Conan growled in frustration. They passed marbled columns and floors. Rugs covered the floors of the rooms. All about the interior of the house Conan observed female slaves in Vengean garb going about their tasks. Jadul appeared to prefer his slaves to be young and beautiful. Something about their garb, however, struck him as odd. Conan realized that unlike the slaves in the yard, the ones in the house did not wear a collar. Jadul had money and power. Perhaps the women were here willingly? They finally stopped in an interior room at the top of a stair. Jadul was attended by a man who was also dressed in the Vengean manner. This man was older and bore a stone in the middle of his forehead. Conan could not help but stare. He had seen some Vengeans who painted their foreheads, but this man actually possessed a dark black opal in his skull. Conan wondered if the stone had been there since the man was born, or if it had been implanted at his forehead. The man examined Jadul and pronounced him unharmed save for the shock of the attack. He prescribed a draught from a filter of dark black liquid. Then the man examined Conan. "It is fortunate for you that you have a thick and bony skull, Outlander. It has saved your life. The laceration is not deep, but it will seep greatly until it is healed. 3 to 4 days, I should think. But given your abnormal size and stalwart health, perhaps as early as tomorrow. I will need to sew it shut," the man said to him. "You are a surgeon?" Conan asked. "Nothing so primitive. My caste has been healing the sick for thousands of years, and with much greater success than the surgeons you are used to," the man said. He pointed to his forehead stone. "This is the proof that you can trust me and my skill." Conan submitted. The doctor quickly went to work with a curved needle and thread. Over the stitch work he placed a herbal plaster, and this he bound to Conan's head with gauze. Conan expected the man's care to hurt more, but such wounds as he has taken in the past had. but instead the operation was over quickly and cleanly. The doctor bowed to Conan. Unsure as to why the doctor did so, Conan imitated him and bowed in reply. This caused the doctor to raise an eyebrow. "Your bandage will need to be changed tomorrow. Come see me again and I will tend to you," the doctor prompted. Conan replied. "Conna," the doctor attempted. "Well, at least his pronunciation is closer than most," Conan bemused. "And you are?" "Pitambar," the doctor said. "Pitamber," Conan attempted. The doctor winced, but smiled good-naturedly. Conan imagined that he had also made some facial tic that betrayed to Pitamber that he had mispronounced Conan's name. The doctor began softly laughing, and Conan could not help but join in. Conan decided that he liked this man. "I have other duties. I must go attend them," Pitambar said. He left the survivors alone in their room and closed the door behind him. A servant with a pitcher of water approached Conan and offered him a cup. He accepted. He sniffed the drink first. He then took a small sip. Satisfied that he had not been poisoned, he drank deeply. The injured guard remained, but the uninjured one left to examine the manor's defenses. Jadul caressed one of his female servants, and she comforted the stricken merchant. "Conan, why were you in the street?" asked the injured guard. "I was hoping to find someone to rob," Conan said honestly. "Yet you expect us to trust you after admitting to your intentions to rob someone?" the man asked. "Your master robs people every day when he overcharges a buyer or underpays a supplier. Is it not so?" Conan asked Jadul. The merchant looked up from the comfort he was receiving and smiled. "It is true that I have been the ruin of many a rival merchant." "My trade is simply rougher than your master's. From time to time, it can also be useful," Conan said. The guard scowled. "I am not sure we will need that kind of aid at the moment." "I am sure you do not. Yet. But there will come a day when perhaps Master Jadul Rajam will hear of a rival that might be a threat to his enterprises. When that day comes, I only ask that you think of my services," Conan replied. "A lone thief is not much of an asset," the guard returned. "Peace, Indrit," Jadul said. His manner has relaxed. It was now jovial. Conan wondered what it was in the black liquid. Some poppy milk? Diluted essence of the Black Lotus? "I am only looking after your interests, my lord," Indrit said. "I realize that, and you do your caste much credit for obeying its strictures. But I am above you in station, and you will obey me." "Of course, my lord," Indrit said. Conan imagined that having to follow the orders of a merchant and protect him from himself would wear on any warrior. Conan did not envy Indrit his duty, despite its obvious comforting wealth. "My servants shall prepare us a feast. Do not worry about poisons. Pitambar will double-check all of our preparations to be sure that there is no threat. As for your offer of future service, I will most definitely call upon you. In return for your deeds today, I offer you not only the replacement of your shield, but any weapon you desire from my armory as well. I also insist that you remain the evening, so that the doctor can tend your wound in the morning with ease. And should you find yourself accompanied in your bed tonight, please feel free to indulge your desires," Jadul said. "You are a most gracious lord," Conan said, and he gave a stiff bow. "Let us spend the time now getting to know one another," Jadul said. "Are you familiar with Chaturanga?" "No," Conan replied. "It is a game that involves the movement of pieces upon a board in turn. But unlike the debased form that I see the Hyborians play, there are dice rolled to determine which piece can be moved. This represents an element of chance, the will of the gods, the unexpected, just like life. Indrit, yourself, I, and this lovely maiden here can all play the game while we speak." Jadul motioned for the girl to fetch them the board and the pieces. She procured a game board of lacquered mahogany from a shelf and placed upon it pieces made of carved ivory. She smiled at Conan as she set up the board. "Now, Conan," Jadul began, "you have been seen some of the fruits of my homeland. Tell us of yours." That evening Conan dined on a meal that was comprised of no meat. Vegetables, spiced and curried, were served along with thick bread that tasted of milk. Conan did not think he had ever had a purely vegetarian meal before, that he had ever enjoyed. The meal was served with a spicy tea, and they finished the evening with a heady wine. Conan retired to a room provided to him by the merchant. In this room he reclined upon a bed more comfortable than any he had ever slept on before. "Wealth has its comforts," he muttered. "And its privileges," a woman replied. Conan recognized the woman whom Jadul had been constantly fondling during the evening. She approached him now wearing no robe. A diaphanous gown was her only covering. Conan watched as she sat at the foot of the bed and bowed her head. "Are you here, girl, because he commanded you?" Conan asked. "It is our way," she replied, "but I do not mind the duty." "I doubt your words proffered to please your master," Conan said. "Then shall I prove their truth to you by my actions?" the girl asked. Conan was about to protest when the gown slipped from her shoulders, and she pressed her body against him. He had heard rumors that the women of the East knew secrets unknown to the women of the West, and it seemed rude to refuse the girl who so eagerly wished to impress him with her cultural knowledge. He awoke without a companion. The myths of the East's seductive superiority had been dispelled last evening for Conan. The girl had not been able to handle his vigor and strength. He arose from the bed and found two more servants at his door. They escorted him to a bathing room and aided him in washing. The two women giggled excitingly when they witnessed his frame. Conan could not understand their language, but he understood the tone. The girl last night had spread a tale, and now they wished to see the Elephant Man, as he was claimed to be. He was escorted to the armory where he found Indrit waiting for him. The man's arm was bound, and he seemed to be in good health. Infections were the worry of warriors in every land. One often survived the crossing of swords, only to lose the battle against which metal was no use. "You look well," Conan said. "As do you," the warrior said in reply. "Shall we choose a weapon, then?" Conan asked. "Yes. You will find more than tulwars within. We had a wide variety of of foreign weaponry," Indrit said. Conan did not miss the slight. Yet he could not say anything in response without risking offending the man. Conan hoped the man would have had the good sense not to press his distaste for the Cimmerian into a brawl. Within the armory, Conan saw a wide variety of personal weaponry: Aquilonian arming swords, Gunderland two-handed blades, and even some strange iron weapons from the Black Kingdoms lay in racks against the wall. Portraits of Arenjuns hung above the weapon racks. "What are those?" Conan asked. "Past masters of arms of the house of Rajam," Indrit answered. "Why is that portrait missing?" Conan asked. For on a shelf above the device that Conan could not guess the purpose of, there was a blank space where a painting should be. That was Master... Indrit paused. "That was the place of Master Garupar. He is no longer in the service of this noble house," Indrit replied. "He committed some indiscretion?" Conan asked. "Yes," Indrit replied stiffly. "I understand that you are not pleased with me. But I ask not to pry, but to know what it is your people may expect of our partnership in the future." Conan said, "Please, confide in me." Indrit regarded the young man. "I doubt you will understand. In my homeland, all are born into a Varna. The Varna of one's birth not only determines what one will do as a profession in life, it also dictates to whom one will marry. Master Garupar did not have the resolve to obey the strictures of our ancestors. His face removed, that he might not shame us. We had no choice but to slay him, of course." Conan stared at the man. The concept of station and of classes remaining apart was not unknown in the lands he had ventured in. Many a noble lord had to dissuade would-be paramours below the station of their daughters. Yet to remove a man's memory of service completely for merely falling in love, when Jadul had no issue in allowing Conan to couple with his servants, seemed hypocritical. They would not take kind to any deception. He would have to be very careful around them. Very careful indeed. He found a suitable replacement for his shield. It was a piece of Zamoran make, but the grip was able to fit Conan's meaty hand. He perused the weaponry, and his hand fell upon a longsword. The weapon was from the forge of some Vanir smith. It had a hilt and a crossguard that gave it the image of a stag's horns. The weapon was slightly thinner than he preferred, but its balance and weight were exceptional. Engraved in the weapon's fuller were Vanir runes that read, "Swords do not lie." "This one," Conan said. "An excellent choice for you, I am sure," Indrit replied. "We should see Dr. Pantibar now," Conan said. Indrit quirked his head. "What?" Conan asked him. "You pronounced his name correctly. It is impressive you picked it up so quickly." "You must have an ear for languages," Indrit remarked. "Such a gift is worthy of respect. In my homeland there are 16 different major languages that are spoken, and hundreds of dialects. Perhaps someday you will visit it." "Perhaps," Conan agreed. Should the women of Indrit's homeland prove as comely and accommodating as the girl that had come to him the night before, Conan could see straying into the jungle mountains of India for a while. They re-entered the manor and waited in a parlor for the doctor. The servant brought Conan some more of the strange bread and fruit. He was not alone for long before Pitambar arrived and examined the wound. "Gods and stones," Pitambar said. "The wound is almost fully closed. You truly healed very quickly." "Another day. Let me reapply the poultice and bind your wound again. You should be fully healed by the rise of the next morning." "Only because I have an excellent doctor," Conan complimented the man. "The best in this land, at least," Pitambar declared. He left the Cimmerian with a bow. Jadul arrived then, arrayed in white and gold silks. He was flanked by attendants. One of these was a scribe who was listing tallies of products in the merchant's warehouse. Conan overheard a comment about the price of spices before Jadul hushed the man. "Here is our friend," Jadul began. "I trust you have found suitable tools in our armory." "Jadul Rajam is a most kind and generous host," Conan said. "Quite. I realize that we did not agree to this, but I feel a reward of coin is appropriate for your deed as well. I do not wish for you to ever think that I am ungrateful," said Jadul. "Never," Conan replied. A servant brought him a small purse of coins. It was heavy. Conan did not open it for fear of counting the coins might be considered rude. "Be careful, friend Conan. Those that have attempted to take my life may take vengeance on you for foiling them," Jadul said. "I doubt that. I am but a lone thief in a city of thieves. Take care, friend Jadul Rajam, and long life to you," Conan said. The Cimmerian left the manor to the strange screeching of the birds and the baleful glare of Indrit. Arenjun's streets were filled with hawkers and vendors, just 40 feet from Jadul's gate, and Conan had left the paradisial world of the manor for the mud and smoking scents of the alleys. A pair of whores approached him for a tryst, but he avoided them. He swatted away 3 small hands attempting to pick his purse. He passed by criers offering to read futures and vendors selling talismans guaranteed to protect the user from all manner of harms. His steps led him to a familiar tavern. Inside its confines he sought the shelter of a booth that sat in a darkened corner. In a few moments he was joined by the shadow of a slim woman. "Kumis-sucking kin?" Coconut the Hyborian asked him beneath her veil. "It was the best I could do in this situation. I had to convince Jadul that I was not in on the plot to slay him," Conan said. He pointed the bandage on his head. "And this?" "As you said, we needed to convince Jadul that you were not in on the plot to slay him," Coconut replied. "A little blood helps sells lies."